Danganronpa 2 is arguably the best game in the series when it comes to the cast. To its mysterious protagonist Hajime, to its absolute bedshit rival character Nagito, and the others, such as Fuyuhiko with his giant character arc and the energetic and upbeat Ibuki. Also, the generally good-natured and adorable Chiaki. When I started the game about a year ago, I genuinely didn't know who my favourite would be. I leaned towards Peko at first because I can always rely on a badass sword user to be my favourite. Nagito was also just generally cool at first, and even when he revealed his true colours, I thought and still do think that he makes for an incredibly cool villain character that I'd also like to do a video on someday. But the character I never expected to become my favourite is the ultimate photographer, Mahiru Koizumi. Now some people may be thinking, Mahiru? You mean that bossy killjoy who yells at all the guys but doesn't bat an eye when any of the girls do something wrong? And you know, I was thinking that same thing at first. I honestly thought I was gonna hate her as well. But I did remember hearing some people say they liked Mahiru, so I just figured that maybe there was something I didn't get, or there was going to be something that she was going to do, like she was going to have like a massive character arc, you know, like how Fuyuhiko does. But she really doesn't, actually. Those who have played the game know she dies really early on in Chapter 2 before we really get to see any development. But luckily for me, out of curiosity, I did decide to do her free time events, and I saw a whole new side to Mahiru that truly clicked with me. First of all, let me address the elephant in the room, the supposed, quote, man-hating. Now, I think that the word man-hating is a bit harsh, but rather she's more just so harsh with the guys, which admittedly is still being biased against them, but unlike Tenko's man-hating where it's presented as almost kind of a joke actually, with Mahiru it's more so presented as a sort of character flaw, and if you play her FTEs, you eventually learn why she's the way she is. For the uninitiated, Mahiru's mother was the original ultimate photographer, and she was always out on business trips, meaning that Mahiru was left at home with her dad, who was a lazy piece of shit. Not really like abusive or anything, just neglectful, and so Mahiru as a result had to basically just do everything around the house. And the reason she's so judgmental of men is because of that. It's like a sort of tough love thing, where she wants them to be more responsible so they don't ever turn out to be like lazy and a slack off like her dad. Now, I still think she is a bit harsh on the guys, but after I heard all that in her FTEs, I sort of understood why Mahiru acts how she does. And I also want to quickly bring up Danganronpa 3. And yes, I know most people consider DR3 to be an absolute dumpster fire, but for one, I personally don't agree. I think it's flawed, but it's not horrible. And second, there are some things that add that are very interesting, especially surrounding Mahiru, who basically gets an entire episode about her. The one about the Twilight murder case. Now, in Danganronpa 2, we learn that everyone has both physically and mentally gone back to when they first entered Hope's Peak by the Near World program. Now, you may have noticed that Mahiru in DR3 Despair Arc is a lot calmer and a lot less bossy with everyone. And to me that sort of implies that she mellowed out over the time in Hope's Peak, and began to sort of trust that while the guys will still have their stupid antics, they do have some sense of responsibility, which in turn implies that the class has mentally grown a lot as well, not just Mahiru. And it's kind of like, because she's like she doesn't tell them off as much. Like, she does see the guys do their antics, and she's like, yeah, business as usual. But it's not like telling them off, kind of, what the hell are you doing, get your act together kind of thing. Now, for all I know, this may not even be the intention. It may just been that the writers wanted to make Mahiru more likable for when they got to her episode. But that's how I like to think about it, at the very least. And the reason she goes back to being bossy in Danganronpa 2, despite it taking place afterwards, is, well, again, the Near World program's memory functions made her forget all that development that she had during her time in Hope's Peak. Now, the reason Mahiru connected with me is, well, for one, she has red hair, and I'm quite fond of redheads, but also, I could see where she was going with her, like, self-confidence issues. I could kinda relate, almost. By almost, I mean pretty much. Like, in one point in her free time event, she does ask Hajime to evaluate her photos, and he just kinda goes, oh, it's good. And that annoys her because she wants to explain why he likes it, and while she does seem a bit ungrateful when he does explain why he likes it, but she's clearly like showing that like on the inside she's like giddy and happy about it on the inside, and she's trying not to show it because she's very much kind of got a bit of a tsundere archetype going on. I don't do photography, but I do a lot of drawing / sketching, which you can see on my Instagram, plug. I do kind of have a thing about that too, like, if people just, like, say they like or dislike something, but then don't explain why, it's, like, it's really annoying, especially if they don't like it and they don't explain why, because it's like, well, what the fuck, what am I supposed to do better if you won't tell me why you don't like it? Like, how do I improve? So, I sort of connected with Mahiru when she said that thing. And there's also the whole thing about the subject matter of her photographs. Her mother is a famous war photographer who obviously would take pictures of the horrors of war, which is a bit of a dark subject, but she also occasionally took pictures of people smiling, which she would show to Mahiru when she came back from her long business trips. And that had an impression on Mahiru, and it made her want to start taking pictures of people smiling and genuinely enjoying themselves, which is a lot more light-hearted than the dark, grim subject matter of her mother's photos. Now, I can't say for certain that this is, like, a big thing, but it's something I've noticed happens every so often, where people tend to like much darker tone stories in media, Danganronpa, ironically enough, being an example. And some people, not like everyone, but there's a few people who seem to really like shitting on lighthearted stories. Like, some people will be like, yeah, Persona 4's the worst Persona game because it's so much more lighthearted and happy than the others, and yada yada yada. They're like, go play like a real like dark game like Persona 3 or Nocturne or DDS. And fittingly enough, Danganronpa 2 is probably the most lighthearted and happy Danganronpa game, with the game letting everyone except Chiaki get a get-out-of-death free card, and Hajime essentially overwriting Izuru by pure mental will, and his belief that he can create his own future. I feel like Mahiru's FTEs almost mirror that idea, and it's pretty ironic coming from a game series as edgy as this, but I think that it's nice that we can have these light-hearted things, because if every story is just dark-hearted, then you're just going to feel miserable all the time. But, like, I think that Mahiru taking pictures of genuine happiness is really admirable, and it shows that happiness is a thing that exists in the world. And I'm starting to sound a bit pretentious, but it's like, happiness it's achievable, you can do it too, you just need to work towards it and earn it. And I think, fittingly enough, the person who needs that message most of all is Mahiru herself. Like, not to be discouraged by the light-hearted subject matter of her photos, and just let herself enjoy it because it's what she likes doing. I do want to clarify that I don't think dark storytelling is necessarily bad. That's not what I'm trying to say. Like, Shin Megami Tensei 4, that game is dark as hell, but I love it. But I think she thinks she'll be ridiculed because the light-hearted subject matter compared to the person she's supposed to be the successor to, who was a war photographer. And obviously war is gonna lead to a lot of dark subjects. War never changes, you know. Seeing her dead body in Chapter 2 was truly soul-crushing, because 1, I hadn't finished her FTEs yet, and 2, I was so invested in this character that I thought I was going to hate. Thither did a video about a character from Honey Pop that's like a really bitchy, terrible person, and how he thinks he tends to like characters a lot more if he goes from being like hating them to liking them, rather than being neutral on them to liking them. And I think he's kind of got a point there, because that's how I felt with Mahiru. Like, at first it was like, oh yes, she's gonna be so annoying, isn't she? But then I was like, maybe there's something about her I just don't understand. And then when I looked into it and did her free time events, I was like, this character is great. My favorite thing about Danganronpa 2 is that your favorite character will either be exactly who you expect, but it can be someone who you didn't expect at all. Like, 2 of my friends had completely different favorites than I thought they would when they went into playing the games. Like, one of my friends really likes kudereis and more calm, quiet girls, so not surprisingly, his favorite Danganronpa 1 character was Kyoko. But his favorite girl in the second game was actually Ibuki, who's the exact opposite of that type of character. And one of my friends at first hated Mikan, and then he learned her backstory, and now he's completely flipped the script and is probably now the biggest Mikan fan I've ever met. And Mahiru also made me indirectly hate Hyoko less than I originally did. as like Mahiru was the one to show that Hyoko did have a soft spot in her mostly cold and black heart, and when Hyoko made that memorial for Mahiru at the start of chapter 3, like, I don't really cry over fiction all the time. Like, I'll feel sad emotions or happy emotions about it, but I don't really, like, visually show it. I don't cry or anything, but, like, that memorial thing, that almost got me. So, when the reveal came, and it turned out everyone was alive, like, I wanted to be mad that the game pussied out and was like, oh yeah, we kept everyone alive, but, like, all I could think was, thank God Mahiru is okay. Yes, I know, I'm a simp. I would like to talk more on my thoughts about the Danganronpa 2 cast revival, but I'll save that for if I ever make a video on Chiaki, because I think it ties in more with my thoughts on Chiaki than Mahiru. In conclusion, Mahiru is my favourite character in DR2, and maybe even my favourite in this series. And I think she gets a lot of shit from some fans who say shit like, oh, she's so bossy and annoying, and oh, she's the most irrelevant character in Danganronpa 2. But she isn't really either of those. Like, you can have your opinion, but I can also equally as so disagree. And I think the whole thing of Mahiru is, the whole, you've heard this story before, books, covers, yada yada. She's not what you expect. And I think that's the great part about Danganronpa. Like, some people are like, oh, why is so much of the information about the characters locked to optional free time events? But I think it can change your perspective on subsequent playthroughs and almost give it a weird sense of almost replay value. Because it's like, on one playthrough, you won't be able to do a character's free time events, and they'll do something shitty, and you'll be like, why the fuck did they do that? That's such a terrible character, dude. But then, like, on another playthrough, you could do their free time events, and suddenly, why they might have done that has context. And I think that kind of, like, different perspective on different playthroughs can really change things up. So, I'm not gonna say objectively that free time events being, like, the objectively correct way to do it, but, like, I personally think that the free time events are interesting in that sense. So, yeah, Mahiru is, like, all about that whole thing of, like, books and covers. Don't judge a book by its cover. Don't judge a photo album by its cover. I do like talking about fictional characters a lot because, I've got no life. And I'd like to make more videos like this, but I'll see as time goes on. So yeah, see you all. I'm signing out. Bye!